Shalom and welcome to Shukul Da'at. I am Rabbi Josh Rose. Making a Nation. This week in the Torah, we're at Parshat Beshalach, which contains the incredible Song of the Sea and also is the moment when the Jewish people become a nation. One thing I want to say about the Song of the Sea, which I'll talk about in just a moment, is that in synagogue on this coming Shabbat, in synagogues all around the world, a very special thing happens during the singing of the Song of the Sea. It's the only time that the congregation together sings in response to the cantor. So the cantor, or whomever is reading the Torah, first of all, they sing in a special Torah trope, a special melody for the song. And there are several verses where there's a call and response, where the cantor sings one verse and the congregation sings the rest of the verse. So I really encourage you to come and be part of this really special once a year celebration and this reenactment of the Song of Redemption. I want to talk about two ways that we can understand the redemption. As the Jewish people come out of Egypt, the Israelites, a nation now on the cusp of redemption, and God separates the sea. What is the spiritual lesson? What is the way that we should understand what's happening in redemption and what is causing this movement from suffering towards freedom? Well, one way that we can understand it, and I would say is kind of the normative way of understanding it, is that the redemption is an expression of, or a manifestation of, God's power over all things. Because after all, God is kind of enacting everything and has planned everything. God tells Moses what to do. God seems to control Pharaoh by saying he was going to harden his heart. So it's as though the whole thing is like a play, and God is the writer and the director of this play. And if you look at the miracle itself, the sea rising up on either side like walls, and a pillar of cloud and fire with the Israelites on the way to the sea, these are actions, they're miracles beyond human imagining. So of course it seems obvious that God is really at the center of redemption. And then just to offer further evidence, if we look at verses from the Song of the Sea itself, that is the song that contains the Michamocha that you may know from our liturgy, and it's the song that the Israelites sing after the sea splits and they are saved. It says, Markvot Paro v'chelo yaravayam. Pharaoh's chariots and his army, he, that is God, has cast into the sea, and the pick of his officers are drowned in the sea of reeds. The deep sea covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, God, glorious in power. Your right hand, God, shatter the foe. In your great triumph you break your opponents. You send forth your fury. It consumes them like straw. At the blast of your nostrils the waters piled up. The flood stood straight like a wall. The deeps froze in the heart of the sea. So all of this language kind of conveys God's majestic power over all things, and the song seems like a victory song to God's power. And if we think about the resonance of that in our own lives, though it may seem like a sort of, sometimes the text may seem like a distant expression of a certain theological vision that may not resonate with us so much, if this emphasis on God's might and dominance and power, in fact, if we look at the text in the right way, we can see that so much of our lives is a confrontation of the limits of our own agency and our own powers. We don't choose where to be born or when to be born. We don't choose the family into which we're born or the particular sets of skills that we are given as gifts, or any of the conditions that surround our lives. So much of what happens in our lives is beyond our control, and there are times when we wait to see what future will unfold before us. And so if we look at it that way, the whole story of redemption in the Song of the Sea can be seen as an expression of the limits on our own efforts and on our dependence, and on the recognition that there's some force operating in the world that seems to guide so much of our lives and determine so many of our choices. But there's another message that we get at the sea. a very different one that reads against the interpretation that I just offered. And that is that our destiny and the fate of our world is in our hands and not God's. So now let me point to a couple of verses that give expression to this. So before the Song of the Sea, when the Israelites are terrified at what's happening and they lose heart because they see the Egyptian army coming after them and they have the sea before them, and they say to Moshe, "Let us be, and we will serve the Egyptians, for it is better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Moses responds by saying, "Hityatzvu ur'u et Yeshuat Hashem." Basically what that means is just stand there and see or witness the salvation of God, the salvation that God will bring. So Moses seems to be buying into the reading that I just offered, which is God is fully in charge. All we have to do is stand here and wait and just witness God's salvation. But God's response immediately following Moses's telling the Israelites to just stand there and watch, God says in chapter 14, verse 15, He says to Moses, "Why do you cry out to me? Deber b'nei Israel v'yisa'u." Speak to the children of Israel and tell them to march forward. So it seems that God is pushing the decision or pushing the agency back on the Israelites, that only when they move, only if they move forward can the redemption take place. And what has to happen before any of these great miracles can be enacted? God seems to need Moses to raise up his staff, which God says, and Moses does several times. It seems to be Moses' action that signals his and the people's readiness for redemption. There's a famous midrash that you may have heard that tells of the Israelites as they make their escape out of Egypt and into freedom. They're standing there before the vast sea with no path forward, and behind them the Egyptians are pursuing them with the army. They have no way out, and finally someone named Nachshon just walks steadily right into the water. He keeps walking and walking until now the water is up to the level of his neck, and only then does the sea split and the miracle occurs. Now, that story about Nachshon, that midrash, which comes to us from the oral tradition and tells us how to understand what happened at the sea, I think is an affirmation of human courage, of human agency, of our decision, of our willingness to move forward, that we are the ones who trigger the redemption. Now, obviously, seeing it either in one way or the other, either as this all being in God's hand or all in human hands, is probably missing the point. And I think that the proper way to understand the Song of the Sea and the process of redemption that Torah is teaching us about is to say that it's both. That there's something beyond us that we need to rely on, trust on, and move towards and hope for, that can inspire us, encourage us. But at the end of the day, we are the ones that have to have the courage to take action and to change the world around us. And it's that Israel's action, Moses' action, and Nachshon's action that actually triggers the redemption and allows the sea to split. But now let me talk about what does this really mean for us, as we're looking at this incredible once-in-history miracle of the redemption from Egypt, and this incredible miracle at the sea with the splitting and the water standing up like walls. What does this really mean for us? So remember that the redemption of Israel is not only a change in their circumstance, that is, being freed from slavery. In order to understand what it might mean for us, we also have to understand that the redemption is a change in how they see themselves. Now they are a people, a nation made up of individuals who understand that their destinies are inextricably bound. The meaning of their lives can only be discovered and their destiny realized in relationship to one another. In next week's Torah portion, that is Parshat Yitro, we will receive the Israelites will receive the Torah, And that Torah will demand that they create together a holy society, a community in which they are responsible to one another. The redemption cannot be understood as just a group of individuals who are now going to be free and lead their lives in freedom as they see fit. Now they emerge as a people, and they are to think of themselves as a people, and they are to act with one another as a people and being responsible for one another. Let's dig a little bit deeper, because I want to share with you a beautiful teaching from Chaim ibn Attar, known as the Or HaChaim, a Moroccan-born teacher, the 17th and 18th centuries. And he focuses on this group of individuals becoming a nation, moving from multiplicity to unity. So the introductory verse to the Song of Songs says, Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Yisrael et hashira azot, which will be familiar to you if you come to the weekly minyan or if you come to Shabbat services. We'll talk about that in a moment. So it's translated, this introductory line is translated usually as, then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song. And then it continues with the verses of the song itself. But the verb yashir, as in Az Yashir, then sang Moses and the children of Israel, that verb yashir actually appears to be a future tense verb, as many people have pointed out, and as the Or HaChaim points out. So he explains, this song will also be sung in the future. The Torah, he says, is making an allusion to the mitzvah. Which mitzvah? It is a mitzvah to sing this song continually, that is day by day, and it is part of the morning prayers. So indeed, every single morning and in Shabbat services, in the Shacharit service, in the morning service, before we actually get to the tefillah, before we get to the prayers themselves, before the Shema, we sing the Song of the Sea. This is just part of the daily fixed liturgy. This precise Song of the Sea that appears in this week's Torah portion is also in our prayer books. So the first part of his teaching is that he says, when the Torah says that then Moses and Israel Yashir will sing this song, that it's talking about us. It's referring to this daily mitzvah that we have to sing this as part of our morning prayers. So the Or HaChaim brings you and me into the picture, or rather, he's reminded us that the Song of the Sea is our song of redemption. And then he introduces this beautiful, essential teaching. He puzzles over something in the first line of the song. So we just spoke about the introduction, but the first line of the Song of the Sea itself says, I will sing to God, for God has triumphed gloriously. The Or HaChaim is curious. The introduction told us that all Israel is singing together. So shouldn't it say, we will sing to God, and not, I will sing to God? Why is it in the first person? Why is it in the singular if the whole nation is singing? Listen to this astonishing teaching. He says, they sang together without any distinction or division between them, so that they became like a single person. They were of a single will, and they said together, I will sing to God, as though they were one person. So this might just look like some kind of grammatical trick, an attempt to gloss over an inconsistency in the language of the Torah, but the Or HaChaim is teaching us something very important. He reminds us that we still sing this every day in our prayers, as I said. Every day we have the chance or the challenge to bring ourselves together, to become like a single person. Rashi later will say that Israel at Mount Sinai was like one person with one heart. The Song of the Sea in our prayer books is trying to have us understand ourselves as one. It wants to connect us to this deepest reality of the human condition, that no person is alone. We are all inevitably connected to one another. So when we see ourselves as apart, as alone, or as enemies, when we divide ourselves from one another, we are suffering under an illusion that we are separate. Our truest selves and our deepest truth is that we are standing together, singing as one. And only when we can do that can we really rise to our fullest potential as a people and as people. Prayer is a kind of spiritual training ground for remembering and enacting this essential truth of our lives. We have 1,000 opportunities every day to make ourselves one. Every word, every act contains the potential to bring us together with other people and holds the secret to our redemption. May all of our words and all of our actions lead us to connect and to unify and to share responsibility for one another and to remember that ultimately that is who we are. In our lives as a congregation, as a people, and as a nation, this message is as critical now as it was all those generations ago at the sea. Thank you for listening.